Young, and The Restless. Spoilers Wednesday, full, the 1st of April, 2026. There are nights when the lights of Las Vegas feel less like celebration and more like a mirror reflecting back the parts of a person they thought they had buried. And for Adam, stepping into that city again is not just a mission. It is a return to something dangerously familiar, something seductive, something that does not ask him to be better, only to be effective. That is what makes this storyline so volatile from the very beginning. It is not about whether Adam can find Matt. It is about whether Adam can find him without losing himself again in the process. I really like Nikki and Victor, but it's time for them to retire. This show is called The Young and the Restless, and every time they bring in a young person, they end up leaving the show, and the old folks stay. Watching love scenes with Jack and Diane, Victor and Nikki, Danny Romalotti and Christine and Lauren and Michael are nice memories, but please let the younger ones have lifelong romances or relationships. Adam and Sally seemed like they had such chemistry on screen and would make a great power couple. Even Lily and Kane would make a great power couple. Then let the children. Why not both? It's nice to have a stable couple together like an anchor, but also we need young romance as well, with couples that have great chemistry and can weather storms together. I think there's a place for both on the show. I find the younger characters boring, and soap acting is not what it used to be. I think many young actors now want to go on to other things and don't want to stay on a show for the long term, hence all the recasts. Back into the day, a good soap job was one for the foreseeable, not so much now. And there's always been a snobbery around it, not to mention Hollywood being gutted out as everything has become so unaffordable. Wasn't that one of the reasons BTG is shot in Atlanta? What I think they need is a new family out at the center. That might help shake things up a bit and give some of the older actors something new to do. The decision to go to Las Vegas is already layered with tension before Adam even arrives. Nick initially insists on going alone, driven by that familiar Newman instinct, the belief that responsibility belongs to him, that problems connected to his world should be handled by his hands. There is pride in that decision, but also something deeper, something almost self-destructive. Nick is not just trying to solve a problem. He is trying to prove that he can control it, that he does not need help, that he can step into danger and walk back out untouched. But Adam refuses to stay behind, and that refusal carries its own weight. Because Adam does not present himself as a savior. He presents himself as someone who understands the terrain in a way Nick never will. Las Vegas is not foreign to him. It is not a risk he is stepping into blindly. It is a world he once thrived in, a world where his darker instincts were not just useful but necessary. And that is where the tension between the brothers begins to shift. Nick sees the trip as a mission. Adam sees it as something more complicated, something that requires him to become someone he has spent years trying to leave behind. Chelsea senses this immediately, and her reaction is not just concern, it is fear, but not the kind she is willing to admit openly. On the surface, she worries that returning to that life will reopen wounds, that it will drag Adam back into patterns that nearly destroyed him. But beneath that concern is something far more unsettling, a recognition that Adam might not experience that return as a burden, but as a release, that the version of himself he left behind might not feel like a mistake when he steps back into it, that he might remember not just the pain, but the power. And that is the part Chelsea cannot fully confront. Because if Adam finds himself again in that world, if he realizes that he enjoys it more than the life he has built in Genoa City, then what does that mean for everything they have tried to create together? What does it mean if the man she loves is more alive in chaos than in stability? When Adam arrives in Las Vegas, the shift is immediate. It is not something he announces. It is something that happens in the way he carries himself, in the way he observes, in the way he moves through the space as if it recognizes him. The name Spider the Gambler is not just a nickname. It is an identity, one that he slips back into with a fluidity that should be alarming, but instead feels almost natural. That is what makes it dangerous. There is no visible struggle. There is no hesitation. There is only adaptation. At first, Adam tells himself that this is temporary, that he is doing what needs to be done, that he is using an old skill set for a specific purpose. But the longer he stays, the harder it becomes to maintain that distance. Because the environment does not just accommodate his darker instincts, it rewards them, it sharpens them. It reminds him of a version of himself that was not constrained by expectation or judgment, a version that operated without apology. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Adam begins to enjoy it. That realization is not immediate. It creeps in through moments, through the thrill of reading a room correctly, through the satisfaction of manipulating a situation to his advantage, through the recognition that in this world he does not have to explain himself. He does not have to justify his decisions. He does not have to carry the weight of being a Newman in the same way. Here he is not the complicated son, the problematic brother, the man constantly trying to prove he has changed. Here he is simply effective, and that effectiveness becomes intoxicating. Nick, meanwhile, begins to unravel in a different way. His initial confidence, his belief that he could control the situation, starts to erode as he realizes how far outside his comfort zone he truly is. He does not have Adam's instincts in this environment. He does not have the same ability to navigate ambiguity, to embrace risk without hesitation. And that creates a tension that he cannot easily resolve. Instead of stepping back, Nick pushes harder. He takes risks he would normally avoid. He makes decisions driven more by frustration than strategy, because there is something deeply unsettling about watching Adam thrive in a space where he himself feels increasingly out of place. It challenges his sense of identity, his belief that he is the more stable, more reliable, more grounded brother, and that challenge does not inspire caution. It inspires escalation. Nick begins to act more aggressively, more impulsively, as if trying to compensate for the control he feels slipping away. He convinces himself that he needs to move faster, to take bigger risks, to outmaneuver the situation before it overwhelms him. But in doing so, he starts to mirror the very behavior he has always criticized in Adam. And that irony is not lost on him, even if he refuses to acknowledge it fully. The dynamic between the brothers becomes increasingly strained, not because they are directly in conflict, but because they are moving in opposite emotional directions. Adam is becoming more comfortable, more confident, more aligned with his surroundings. Nick is becoming more tense, more reactive, more uncertain, and that imbalance creates a dangerous gap between them. Meanwhile, the search for Matt becomes more than just a goal. It becomes a catalyst for everything else that is happening. Matt is not just a target. He is a symbol of the chaos they are trying to control, the unpredictability they are trying to contain. But the closer they get to him, the more it becomes clear that this is not a situation that can be resolved cleanly. Adam understands this before Nick does. He recognizes that finding Matt is not the end of the problem, it is the beginning of another set of consequences. And that awareness makes his actions more calculated, but also more morally ambiguous. He begins to operate in ways that blur the line between strategy and manipulation, between necessity and choice. Nick, on the other hand, continues to push forward with a sense of urgency that borders on recklessness. He wants resolution, he wants control, he wants to prove that he can handle this without becoming something he is not. But the more he tries to assert that control, the more it slips through his fingers. Back in Genoa City, the ripple effects of their absence are being felt in quieter but equally significant ways. Danny's involvement in bringing Tessa and Daniel closer together adds a layer of emotional complexity that contrasts sharply with the tension in Las Vegas. It is a reminder that connections are still being formed, that relationships are still evolving, even as others are being tested. But even this development is not without its own complications, because it introduces new dynamics, new loyalties, new questions about where people belong and who they are becoming. And in a world where every relationship is interconnected, those shifts matter. Chelsea, watching from a distance, becomes increasingly uneasy. She can sense the change in Adam, even if she cannot see it directly. There is a difference in his voice, in his tone, in the way he speaks about what he is doing. It is subtle, but it is there. And it confirms her deepest fear that this is not just a mission for him, it is a rediscovery. Personally, this is where the story reaches its most compelling point, because it forces us to question whether change is ever truly permanent, whether people can fully leave behind parts of themselves that once defined them, or whether those parts are always waiting just beneath the surface, ready to reemerge under the right conditions. Adam is not becoming someone new in Las Vegas. He is becoming someone old, someone he knows intimately, someone he understands in a way that makes the transition feel effortless. And that raises a difficult question. If that version of himself feels more natural, more effective, more alive, then what does that say about the life he has built since leaving it behind? Nick, in contrast, is being forced to confront his own limitations. He is discovering that strength is not just about control, but about adaptability. And that realization is not coming easily. It is coming through mistakes, through risks, through moments where he is pushed beyond his comfort zone. As the situation escalates, the possibility of failure becomes more real. Not just failure to find Matt, but failure to return unchanged. Failure to maintain the identities they believe define them. And that is what makes this storyline so powerful. It is not just about external conflict. It is about internal transformation. Because by the time this is over, regardless of the outcome, neither Adam nor Nick will be the same. The question is not whether they will succeed, it is what they will lose or gain in the process. And in a place like Las Vegas, where every decision carries risk and every victory comes with a cost, that question becomes impossible to ignore. There are nights when a man convinces himself he is still in control, when he repeats the same lie so often it begins to sound like truth, and when the thin line between strength and self-destruction becomes almost impossible to see. This is where the story tightens around Nick not as a hero trying to fix a problem, but as a man quietly unraveling while insisting that nothing is wrong. And what makes it more dangerous is not that others fail to notice, but that he is determined to hide it, especially from the one person who would recognize it fastest, Adam. Nick's descent does not begin with a dramatic collapse. It begins with small compromises, the kind that feel justified in the moment. Pain management becomes necessity. Necessity becomes habit. Habit becomes dependence. And somewhere along that path, the clarity that once defined him begins to fade. The pills do not just dull physical discomfort. They soften his judgment, blur his instincts, and create a version of confidence that feels real but is dangerously artificial. He tells himself he can handle it, that he has always been the steady one, the responsible one, the brother who does not spiral, but that belief becomes part of the problem because it prevents him from recognizing how far he has already drifted. He begins to make decisions not based on logic, but on a distorted sense of urgency. He takes risks he would have once avoided, pushes boundaries he would have once respected, and dismisses concerns before they can fully form. And beneath all of this is a deeper fear, one he refuses to confront directly. He does not want Adam to see him like this, not because he fears judgment in the usual sense, but because he fears what it would mean. Adam has always occupied the role of the unstable one, the unpredictable one, the brother who operates on instinct rather than restraint. If Nick becomes the one losing control, then the balance between them shifts in a way he is not prepared to accept. So he hides it. He hides the pills. He hides the exhaustion. He hides the moments where his thoughts feel slower, less precise, less reliable. And in doing so, he isolates himself further, cutting off the very support that might help him regain control. It is a quiet kind of tragedy, the kind that builds over time unnoticed, until it reaches a point where reversal becomes difficult. Adam, meanwhile, senses that something is off, even if he cannot immediately identify what it is. There is a difference in Nick's behavior, a tension that does not align with the situation they are facing. But Adam misinterprets it at first. He assumes it is stress, pressure, the weight of responsibility, and that misinterpretation allows the problem to grow unchecked. What makes this dynamic so compelling is that Adam himself is not in a stable place. His return to the identity of Spider the Gambler has awakened something in him that is both familiar and unsettling. He is more confident, more decisive, more aligned with the environment they are navigating. But that confidence comes from a part of himself he has spent years trying to suppress. And the more he embraces it, the harder it becomes to separate who he was from who he is trying to be. This creates a dangerous imbalance between the brothers. Adam is becoming sharper, more focused, more effective. Nick is becoming more erratic, more impulsive, more vulnerable. And neither of them fully understands the shift that is taking place. They are moving in opposite directions, and that divergence is setting the stage for a conflict that has not yet fully surfaced. At the same time, another storyline unfolds with a completely different tone, but one that is just as emotionally charged. Danny, in his own way, is trying to bring light into a situation that has been weighed down by tension and uncertainty. His desire to lift Daniel's spirits is genuine, rooted in a deep sense of responsibility as a father. He sees the strain in his son, the lingering frustration, the feeling of being stuck in a place that no longer offers growth or joy. His solution is simple, almost idealistic. He offers Daniel an escape, an opportunity to step away from everything and join him on tour. It is not just about music. It is about movement, about change, about rediscovering a sense of purpose. Danny believes that a shift in environment can create a shift in perspective, that distance from the problems of Genoa City might allow Daniel to see things more clearly. But Daniel's response is grounded in reality. He recognizes the limitations of the offer not because he lacks interest, but because he understands himself. He is not a performer in the same way. He does not share the same connection to music. And rather than forcing himself into a role that does not fit, he acknowledges where he stands. This is where the story takes an interesting turn, because instead of abandoning the idea, Danny adapts it. He expands the invitation to include Tessa, recognizing her talent, her connection to music, and the dynamic she shares with Daniel. It is a thoughtful decision, one that reflects his ability to see beyond a single perspective and consider what might truly benefit both of them. And yet, even this well-intentioned gesture carries potential complications, because bringing Daniel and Tessa into a new environment, into a space defined by performance, travel, and constant change, introduces new variables. It challenges their relationship, tests their adaptability, and forces them to confront questions about where they belong and what they want. What makes Danny's role so compelling is that he operates from a place of optimism, but that optimism exists within a world that rarely rewards simplicity. He believes in solutions, in opportunities, in the idea that people can find their way forward if given the right chance. But the reality is that not every problem can be solved through movement, and not every relationship can withstand the pressures that come with change. Personally, this is where the contrast between the two storylines becomes particularly striking. On one side, there is Nick descending into a quiet, controlled chaos, hiding his struggle, making decisions that grow more dangerous with each step. On the other, there is Danny trying to create something positive, to offer a path forward, to bring people together in a way that feels constructive. But both paths are uncertain. Both carry risk. And both are driven by deeply human motivations. Nick wants to maintain control, to protect his identity, to avoid appearing vulnerable. Danny wants to support his son, to create opportunities to foster connection. Neither intention is inherently flawed, but the execution of those intentions will determine the outcome. As the story progresses, the tension surrounding Nick begins to build in subtle ways. Small mistakes become more frequent. Decisions that once felt calculated begin to feel rushed. There are moments where his reactions do not align with a situation, where his responses feel slightly off, slightly delayed, slightly disconnected. And while these moments may seem insignificant on their own, they accumulate, creating a pattern that becomes harder to ignore. Adam eventually starts to notice this pattern, but by the time he does, the situation has already escalated. The realization that Nick is not just stressed but compromised shifts the dynamic between them in a profound way. Adam is forced to confront a version of his brother he has never seen before, one that challenges his assumptions and forces him to reconsider his role. This is where the emotional complexity deepens. Because Adam, who has spent so long being perceived as the unstable one, now finds himself in a position where he may need to be the responsible one. And that shift is not comfortable. It requires him to step into a role he has never fully embraced, to act in a way that contradicts the identity he is currently rediscovering. Nick, meanwhile, resists any attempt to intervene. He denies the problem, deflects concern, insists that everything is under control. And that resistance only intensifies the conflict, creating a situation where both brothers are forced to confront not just each other, but themselves. The story does not offer easy answers. It does not resolve the tension quickly or cleanly. Instead, it allows the complexity to unfold, to deepen, to challenge the characters in ways that feel authentic and consequential. Because at its core, this is not just a story about addiction or opportunity or family dynamics. It is a story about identity, about the roles people assign to themselves and each other, and about what happens when those roles begin to shift. And in a world like Genoa City, where perception often shapes reality, that shift can be just as dangerous as any external threat.